What is going on, people? Welcome to Big Conversations Podcast. My name is Ben. You can call me Big Ben.
My name is Peyton, and I'm super excited to be here.
Here's the thing, guys. We love having conversations that other people don't think we should have.
Right.
And one of the big problems that we have in American society, and really the big thing we're going to get into on this episode, is the problem with American society and why that has created this big controversial topic that we're going to get into a little bit. And so it's interesting. People who go to Southern Adventist University or whatever, maybe I shouldn't say too many names because let's just be real, they don't want to be affiliated with this podcast. But nonetheless, I've been doing what I called conversation starters on my stories. I'd put up just like a different statement. Like some of the more popular ones were guys and girls can be just best friends. Or I think probably the best one I did was if they wanted to, they would have. And I would let people vote with like the slider. What is that thing called? Like you can put like the 100 emoji on it?
I don't really know, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Nobody knows what it's called.
Right. No, I don't think it has
knows.
a name, but yeah.
Everyone knows what it is. And so what we did is first I would let people respond, do all this other stuff. And then at the end of the day, I'd pick up my phone, I'd kind of record a little selfie video and be like, this is what I think. And obviously I'm going to say that I was completely right on every single one. Now, what was interesting is that after a while, somebody responded and they were like, hey, Ben, why don't you take some time in the evenings to just go live on Instagram and have like a live discussion? I can come on. And it's funny because that person, I think maybe he'd come on once or twice, but he didn't end up being the main person who was involved because, I did them late at night.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my logic. Like I figured, especially going to Southern, intramurals are earlier in the evening, and plus people are just frankly busy during the day. But if you wait till at night, let's just be real. People say they're in bed. They're not. They're on their phone. So why not tune into Instagram and see something interesting? And so very recently, I did an internship over the summer in Orlando. So when I was driving back from Orlando, I just kind of threw up a little story and I was like, hey guys, just ask me questions. I'll answer as many of them as I can on the trip. The second question I got, and actually the first question too, but especially the second one, somebody brought up some really controversial figure. And I answered the question, and then people responded by asking the same question again 2 more times on the trip. And at the end, I ended up saying, you know what, I'm not going to talk about this anymore because this is kind of an old, tired topic. I've already given my opinion. I actually called this person counterfeit currency. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a big conversation, okay? Now, the plan of the show is we're going to talk about what prompted this topic with this controversial figure, and then we're going to talk about why this is important, and then finally we're going to get into what we're actually talking about, kind of the nitty-gritty behind it and the relationships between the things. So, Peyton, what are we talking about?
Whew, boy, would I love to tell you, Ben. Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate. We've all heard the name. You guys, most of you listeners probably will be people who know that I went live on Instagram just a couple weeks ago. Actually, I brought a couple friends on, and it was good because we had a good conversation. I called Andrew Tate counterfeit currency, and I'm not going to repeat that. You guys can go back and watch the live archive if you want to. But after we finished that conversation, I kind of settled. I don't really approve because I think that bottom line, he's just not up to a high enough ethical standard for me to get behind him. His whole business model is based on lying, cheating, and stealing. The whole nine, right? But what was interesting is that 2 of the women that I had on the Instagram live, and women in general, I really don't want to paint this as just those 2 women, but a lot of women are under the impression that all the men who love Andrew Tate are the, live in their mom's basement, Diet Coke cans stacked, as high as their bed rest on the side. They only have like a remote in one hand.
Video games all night.
Exactly. They don't do anything. They don't have a job. You know what I'm talking about. They think that the guys who like Andrew Tate are like that.
Yeah.
But what I realized when I paid attention is that actually the guys girls like tend to be guys who also like Andrew Tate. It's not just those guys. Yes, I'm saying it. Women love men who love Andrew Tate. If you're a lady and you don't agree with me, I'm just going to say you don't know your male friends very well. So that's something I'd noticed. Had you noticed that as well?
I actually have noticed that, yeah. And what I find to be very interesting is that women typically blame those men for performing in those actions that they are, but actually the women, I think, are in a circular, in about it way creating those men.
They work together, I agree. So the second thing that prompted this topic is that people give Andrew Tate so much credit for any self-improvement type of content that they see on social media. And now, Peyton, the thing that I find really interesting is that there have been people like Eric Thomas, you could put Jordan Peterson in that category a little bit, who for the longest have been putting so much good, positive, clean content on social media.
Exactly.
Telling people to get up, to work harder, to do all this other stuff. And somehow these new radical Andrew Tate worshipers forget about all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then now that Andrew Tate's there, they're like, oh, well, but he's making my life better because he's telling me to work hard. So that's another thing I've been noticing. Now, the third thing that prompted this topic, and Peyton, this is where I said we have to do a podcast episode on this. People are comparing Andrew Tate to Kevin Samuels. People, there is no comparison. The only thing those two men have in common is their, shall we say, traditional views on relationships and marriage. Other than that, there's no similarity between Kevin Samuels and Andrew Tate. So,
and even among those two topics, there are definitely some differences that I've noticed as well. So
correct.
Yeah,
and we'll get into that a little bit more.
It's hard to put them in the category, but
right. So, why is this important? Very simply, third wave feminism platformed Andrew Tate. And that sounds like a strong thing to say, but we're going to get into it a little bit more in the show. If feminism did not present an image of men that was so repulsive to men and honestly to women, there would be no space for an Andrew Tate on social media. Now, the second reason this is important, and this is something that I really hope we can get into more as well, is that Andrew Tate's disregard for God's plan, frankly, is dangerous.
Yep.
Well, no, I'm not somebody who wants to sit here and just impose my Christian values on the rest of the world.
Right.
If you see it differently, go do your thing. It's a free country. The problem is having a different perspective and a different truth you adhere to doesn't change just the basic rules of reality.
And might I even add, adding or having a different principle or a different mindset that is different than somebody else, that also doesn't make it wrong just because you don't agree with it.
Correct. So, what are we talking about? America has a culture problem. The reason why Andrew Tate exists is because men feel they are only important if they're rich and providing a luxury lifestyle to a woman. And women feel that the only kind of man that's important enough for them to be with is a man who is rich and provides a luxury lifestyle. Forget any other values. So, one thing that I thought was really interesting is that people use the term third wave feminism a lot. And I'm sure you've heard that, right?
I have.
And especially think of like your conservative friend, some aunt that you have who's always just super heavy on this, I hate Joe Biden and all this other stuff, right? So, but I think most people our age, we don't know really like what the, like, I didn't know what second wave.
Well, and I had heard of like third wave, and I'm pretty familiar with third wave, but then it took a little bit of digging to figure out what exactly first and second wave, and then even fourth wave. So like third wave, I think for some reason is like more circular, more popular to talk about. But so first and second, you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And for me, I didn't even know that there was a fourth wave until literally yesterday when I Googled it. But history.com came in clutch. Here's what I found. So the first wave of feminism brought voting rights to women. And I think we can both agree, a very positive thing. There's no reason why I should be able to vote, but Peyton over here shouldn't.
Right.
We should have equal rights in that regard.
Yep.
You're just as much of a functioning member of society as I. Now, the second wave of feminism brought in the Equal Pay Act. So basically now you can't pay a man more than a woman to do the same job. Now, the second thing that came with that is the Roe v. Wade. How do you say? You know what I'm talking about. Abortion rights came to women. Now, that's obviously a different topic. That's something we could get into in a different episode.
Podcast. Yes. You never know.
But what second wave feminism brought is equal pay and equal reproductive rights to women under the law. Okay? Now, the third wave of feminism, this is what people talk about more often. This is where feminism took a little bit of a pivot here. It became more about anti-racism, anti-sexism, which, and notice how these are kind of vague terms. It's hard to put a finger on. And sexual harassment awareness, okay? Now, none of these things are bad in particular, but isn't it a little bit ironic that we go from protect women, make sure women are treated as human beings to things that don't necessarily even pertain specifically to women? This is when the transgender movement gained a big acceptance among the feminist movement as well. And I don't have it written down in my notes here, but there was some psychologist who She was a black woman, I said it. And she had, some different theories on gender, so that's when that ended up getting brought, into feminism. And actually, there's now a fourth wave as well. And I believe they said the fourth wave started in about 2009. And the difference between the third and the fourth wave is not so much the message they preach. They're still about anti-racism. They're still about, anti-sexism, sexual harassment awareness.
Right.
Again, not bad things. But now we put exponents on it because social media has entered the chat. So now we get the hashtag #MeToo. And again, these are all issues we can dive into on another podcast. But we're talking about controversial figure Andrew Tate. Why are we talking about this? What are we talking about? So, the culture problem America has, if you ask me, is that we have so deeply bought into what feminism has told us, even though in some ways it actually contradicts reality. Basically, feminism at this point is telling women it's better to have a boss than to have a husband. It's telling women that men are not important and men are not valuable except as they provide the same thing a boss could provide you. Money. And so now what we get is a man like Andrew Tate. We don't know exactly how he got his money. That's not really super important. He tells us that he got a lot of it by the lying, by the deceit. He did his whole, flying all the girls in, doing the webcam stuff. He was working the keyboard and they were just working the camera, right? Now, because feminism has painted that picture that that's what men need to be, and because both men and women have bought into that.
There you go.
Starving men just jumped at the opposite extreme that says, oh, you can be all that. And women should only value that you for what you think should be the only important thing. Well, now that was never God's plan.
Agreed.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think kind of you had touched on it briefly earlier, but I would like to kind of go back to it. The fact that there are so many positive figures out there that aren't receiving the hype that Andrew Tate is, I think a lot of that is due to these radical feminists that are saying, oh my word, can you believe this guy? And giving him the hype that he is pretty undeserving of. And then this makes the other men go, is that what they want? I want to be like Andrew Tate. He's getting attention. He has money. I know that girls like money. I'll be just like Andrew Tate. So it is this whole circle of just like almost toxicity if you really slow down and think about it. So yeah.
Pretty toxic. Yeah, no, that is definitely true. And see, the next point I have written down here, what are we talking about, is look, men, you can be great without all this other Andrew Tate BS. See, one of the problems that we have is that we inherently understand that achievement is critical. You can't just say, I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to be a good man. I'm going to do the right thing. Like, at some point, there is a certain amount of money you have to make.
Right.
That is completely important, right? Andrew Tate being wrong and feminism being wrong, these are not mutually exclusive things.
Right.
We're looking at an extreme and another extreme.
Yes,
There's
exactly.
so much space in the middle, and that is where the truth lies.
Exactly, yeah.
But I want to circle back to the other thing, because it is true, and like I can tell you from a man's perspective myself, men really do feel in this current climate like they are actually not worth anything as a human being unless they are rich and they are getting the attention of lots of women. And I hate to say it, but I have to be honest. Most of the time, women are only in droves giving attention to men who are rich. And it doesn't matter how they got there. It doesn't matter what they do. And this is all just indicative of the big culture problem that I believe America has in general. I hope that makes sense. So, and then the next point we're going to get into on here is that it's the Kevin Samuels thing.
Oh boy.
So, anybody who knows me, and if you don't know me that well, you're going to learn right now, I am like the biggest Kevin Samuels proponent you'll find out there. Now, I will admit, he was rogue. He said some things I wouldn't say, and some of his advice to people, excuse me, some of Kevin Samuels' advice to people doesn't line up with biblical ideals.
Right.
But bottom line here, Peyton, the big difference between these two men is that Kevin Samuels promoted marriage, family, and honesty. Andrew Tate promotes materialism, and he promotes dishonesty. That is where those men completely split apart.
Right.
So I know you're a little bit familiar with both of their content. How do you see these guys as different?
Well,
because I see them as miles apart.
Right. No, I agree. Definitely going off of what you just said, like when it comes to marriage, Kevin Samuels is very much promoting that. He's promoting more Christian values. There's more morality. There's more things that I as a female can definitely get behind and can understand. Whereas with Andrew Tate, it's like the first thing on his mind what he's chasing after is money and after fame, whereas Kevin Samuels is actually trying to prepare people for real life, prepare people for love, saying, hey, you know, like, I think that you are deserving of these things. Let me coach you through this. Let me show you how. And like you were saying, he has said some things, some controversial things, but his word is not like the Bible. It's not like you have to hear one of his YouTube videos and take everything that he says exactly as it is. Like, you can pick through, you can weed through, and I think he has a lot of good advice when you slow down and listen to it. And yeah, I would definitely agree that these men are very different. And hearing them compared, I think that people just haven't investigated and haven't actually watched those videos very well. So
yeah, and full disclosure, the majority of my exposure to Andrew Tate is just that Full Send podcast episode.
Right.
We've all seen it. You know what I'm talking about. But I remember when he was talking about, it wasn't Hustlers. Was it Hustlers? I think it might have been Hustlers University. It doesn't matter, but some business venture that he does.
Okay.
He said when he's talking to people and he wants to see if they're a good fit to be part of the program, he asks them, oh, do you want to do something that you're going to enjoy for the rest of your life and like have fulfilling work? And he's like, if they say yes, no, I don't want those people. And again, achievement is critical. I'm not saying that you can just, like, I like sleeping in more than I like getting up and going to work. And me enjoying sleeping in is not a good enough reason for me to not go to work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't have to make money. Don't clip it. Don't say I said that. You have to make your money.
Yes.
That's not bad. But here's the problem. Then he said, if he finds somebody who doesn't care what they do, they just want to get a paycheck. Just as long as they get a paycheck, they'll do anything. Those are the type of people he wants in this program.
Right.
If that isn't a clear sign, we lie, cheat, and steal over here. We don't care about morality whatsoever.
Yeah.
We will cut any corners. We will do anything to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're going to find. I don't know what you're going to find. What most people do is they just compare what people feel like they want.
Yes.
Okay? And Kevin Samuels did that too. He would ask women, okay, well, what do you want? Do you want to be married?
Right.
Do you want to work to pay significant bills? All these other questions, right? And then he would get them to a point of understanding, look, like, everything has a cost in life. Nothing's free. A man who's up here, he's not going to be looking all the way down here to find a woman. He's going to be looking for someone who's kind of on his level. And on his level doesn't mean financially. It means having a look and all that, right? Now, with Andrew Tate, kind of, and how we're bringing the conversation here, is that Andrew Tate is definitely a fan of, what would be the term? So sleeping with a lot of different women, having a harem with you. There's a word for that, right? I'm just not thinking of what it is right now. Promiscuity. There we go.
Yes.
Andrew Tate, he believes that promiscuity is optimal. And I remember he said in the Full Send podcast episode, it's possible that one day I may, get married and, live with a woman and raise a family. He said it's not optimal, but it's possible, right? And most people think that's just fine because that's a choice you can make in a free country. And I understand if you're speaking just from a my truth worldly perspective, right?
Yeah.
But see, here's the problem. God did create us. Now, you don't have to subscribe to a Christian worldview. I'm not trying to imply that at all.
Right.
But what you do have to acknowledge if you want to be right is that God did create us, and he created our minds to work a certain way.
Exactly.
And so I remember when we did the Instagram Live, I had people kind of coming at it from a moral perspective. Oh, well, I wouldn't participate with a guy like Andrew Tate, so I don't like where he's going. I don't think this is fair. And I don't really have sympathy for the women who are with him because they know. They sign themselves up for that lifestyle. Yeah. Like, do you... If you were dating a rapper, would you think that he would be loyal to you?
Absolutely not.
And Andrew Tate would be even worse. Exactly. Right? And these women know what they're getting into. But I think what a lot of girls see a lot of times that turns them off is the fact that these relationships don't really work long term.
Right.
And so that's something I touched on in my live too. I said these relationships that men like Andrew Tate and women like whatever women sleep with him have, they're not real relationships. It's kind of like, it's a quid pro quo of sorts. It's a contract where I give you a luxury lifestyle, you give me your body. And that's what they're doing. But the problem is why that can never work long term is that God didn't create human minds, and this is a little strong to say. I think you'll agree with me here though.
I like where you're going.
The way God created women's minds, they're even more sensitive to these negative effects of promiscuity.
Yes.
So the big problem is what a lot of people want to do is they want to just say, oh, is it fair? Is it not fair? Right? It's fair. But what I don't do is go about life just assuming that my truth, my opinion, what I think, what I would like to be true for me, what's advantageous for my desires is how things are going to work. Because that's just not how it is.
No.
How it is that God made our minds a certain way. We're not supposed to be sleeping with everybody. We're supposed to be loyal to one person,
Exactly.
right? It can be fair to not do it that way, but it doesn't work because that's just not how we were made.
Yeah. I have to agree. And especially coming from the science background and the biological background that I have come from.
Yeah. And that's why it's perfect to have you on here. Because I can flatten my gums a lot, but you know a lot more.
Right.
Scientific facts, data, and statistics, people. Use them.
Yes. The male brain and the female brain actually do connect differently in sex and specifically sexual intercourse, if I can say that on here.
Of course.
Like the female brain does respond differently than the male brain. And what's interesting is that it evokes more connectivity, more emotional hormones that give a response of love and affection. Whereas
is oxytocin one of those?
It is one. Yes, actually. Good job. Way to go. Hey. Yeah. We won't get into the nitty-gritty science, but whereas for the male, it does tend to be more. Males are visual, and males that is not as much of a connectivity and like moment of bonding for men. They bond in other ways, but so that is where it can be harder for the woman. And I think that a lot of times these women that are participate in this promiscuity with Andrew Tate is they might sign up for it thinking, oh, I'm going to get a ride in a private jet. I'm going to get, a Prada bag. Like they sign up for it and then they have sex with Andrew Tate and then they go, wait, actually, no, I don't like this. And then they start to complain about it when they knew from the get-go what they were signing up for. But the repercussion is that God did not design human bodies to work the way that they're trying to make them work. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And Peyton, I think one of the main reasons why women have so much vitriol, I think that's the word, just animosity toward both Kevin Samuels and Andrew Tate is that they both acknowledge that it can be a fair deal, right?
Yeah.
If the man says, I'm not going to be loyal to you, but I'm going to give you a luxury lifestyle, a lot of times women take that deal.
Yeah.
And then they change their mind later on.
Exactly.
And we touched on the feminism thing earlier, the whole, the vague sexual harassment awareness, the anti-sexism, anti-racism, all this other stuff. I think a lot of times what happens is that just in our modern messed up culture, we like to give marginalized people so much credit, and anytime they say something isn't working for them, then we just try to change the rules for them. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because then men have to change the way they're playing the game mid-game as well. They get frustrated, they start behaving bad, the cycle continues. It's just a mess.
I'd have to agree there.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to transition. Now, for a big conversations podcast staple, one of the things I want to incorporate on every episode is we're going to ask the question, do you have a problem with something that's relevant to the topic that we've discussed on the episode? So today, we've talked about the highly controversial and, dare I say, flagrant Andrew Tate. Now, the question that I have for you today, Peyton, is do you have a problem with Andrew Tate being deplatformed on social media? Because, see, he did say some really strong things, and I don't have these links right here. I can't just pull it up on my phone.
Right.
Apparently, he talks about, beating a woman with a belt if she's not, being obedient or some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
I would understand if people had somewhat of a problem with that kind of content. Then again, there's a lot of other very flagrant content that's just fine. It just slides on social media.
Exactly, yeah.
Andrew Tate, deplatformed. Do you have a problem?
I would say overall that yes, I do have a problem. And I can sit here and tell you right now that selfishly, I think it's good that he was removed because it protects people, it protects women. It
protects men, too.
And it protects men, honestly. Yeah, it does. So I think that, when you slow down and think about it, and when you initially go, oh, man, I'm good, glad to get that guy out of here. But when you slow down and actually realize that that's infringing on his freedom of speech and ultimately our freedom of speech, it's a little bit alarming because although somebody might not agree with what he's saying, he should still have a right to say whatever he wants to say. And like I said, I think the guy is a tremendous jerk, but he should still have a platform where he can share his voice even if people don't agree. So,
and what's really interesting? I think you could make an argument that fourth wave feminism is just as dangerous for society as what Andrew Tate is saying. So it's kind of interesting that one side is being completely removed, completely deplatformed. And I do find it interesting, this is kind of a tangent, that I believe after he was deplatformed, Tucker Carlson brought Andrew Tate on his show to kind of talk about the whole deplatforming thing because, you know, this conversation is usually framed in terms of, you know, the left runs social media and the left runs off people who tend to be more politically right. That's a different conversation. I'd love to talk about that on another podcast.
Let me tell you.
But where I'm trying to go with this is that, in a way, though, I think I could play devil's advocate a little bit and say that, yes, I'm going to say I do have a problem. But I'm like 51% I do have a problem and 49% I don't.
Okay.
Because, again, like we said earlier, both sides being wrong is not mutually exclusive. Just because feminism is damaging doesn't mean that it's a good idea to bring Andrew Tate on as well.
Right.
And it's funny, I'm remembering now the thing I was going to bring up to you a little earlier. So as far as Andrew Tate and can we get our content for motivational self-help and things like that from sources like him, or should we go elsewhere? See, when I was a little kid, my mom used to make split pea soup. Do you know what split peas are? I feel
little,
like most people don't.
Circle with like the brown part at the one end?
Kind of, yeah.
Maybe.
Like when you cook them, it turns like a light yellow color. They look kind of green, but they're like cut in half. Think like a green pea if it was dried and just cut in half.
All right.
I should be able to explain it better. I can't. That's not
beautiful,
the point.
actually.
So my mom, she would make a split pea soup, and I really enjoyed it. And so one time there was a magazine that I guess somehow got brought home, maybe from the mail or whatever, and she didn't want me to look at it because I was young and it had some, you know, objectionable content in it. And I was kind of complaining. I was like, oh, Mom, why can't I look at this? And she looked at me and she was like, Ben, imagine if somebody made you a split pea soup you like. And they made it in like a dirty pot, like a dirty garden bucket that the dog had been cleaned up and put in that and God knows what else, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't eat that soup that was cooked in that pot because like it might still taste good, especially in the middle, but you can get so much better soup somewhere else.
Right.
And in the same way I say, why get your motivational content from Andrew Tate when Eric Thomas exists?
Agreed.
When Jordan Peterson exists. Like, there's so many other ways people can go to get this content. I really don't understand why people are so insistent on going to Andrew Tate for this content when there's so much of it on the internet.
And piggybacking off of that, I think that almost removing him completely from social media almost gives him more popularity and puts the spotlight on him more than if people just simply ignored him or blocked him. Because without a lack of fan base, without a lack of followers, and although people are still going to support him, yes, but if instead of talking about him all the time, as we're doing, not necessarily that it's bad, but just giving him...
We're part of the problem.
Giving him the fame that he doesn't deserve will just continue to fuel his fire. So if people just simply ignored it, and like not necessarily ignoring the problem will make it go away, because I don't 100% believe that all the time, but I think that continuing to talk about him, continuing to talk about whether his social media ban should be allowed or should not be allowed, it's just going to circulate and keep letting people talk. So
I think the bottom line that we're getting to in this conversation is that this talk has been good, but the best thing we can do for society to fix this culture problem is we need to stop talking about Andrew Tate. We need to just cut this off. So what have we gone through today? What has been today's big conversation? So what prompted the topic is that women actually love men who love Andrew Tate. And people give Andrew Tate so much credit for all the self-improvement content on the internet as if it wasn't something that had been there for decades before. And then Andrew Tate was getting compared to Kevin Samuels. One man is dishonesty and materialism. The other man is marriage, family, and honesty. They're not the same. Why is this important? It's important because this is driven by the culture problem in America. Feminism created Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate's disregard for God's plan is dangerous. Opinions that you have about the fairness or lack thereof of modern relationships don't change the way God made our brains. So, what did we talk about? We talked about how America's culture problem is what platformed Andrew Tate. We talked about how the waves of feminism have progressed to not really be about protecting women anymore, but to be about, frankly, just a denial of the truth, if we're being really honest. And then we talked about how a man can be a great man without all this other Andrew Tate BS. Eat from a clean pot, kids. You don't have to do this nonsense. And finally, we talked about how Kevin Samuels was rogue, but him and Andrew Tate are not walking down the same path. They might both have, two eyes, one nose, and one mouth, but the similarity really ends there. So finally, we do have a problem with Andrew Tate being deplatformed, but it's not the worst thing that could happen. All right, guys.
So
thank you so much for listening to the episode. We will see you next time. You can stop it.